Picture this. The year is sometime in the early 1400s, while European explorers are still nervously clinging to the Mediterranean coastline. A fleet of Indian ships, richly carved and heavy with spices, sails boldly across the vast unknown Atlantic. And then, one bright morning, they spot land, lush, green, and unlike anything they've seen. Forget Columbus. Forget Zheng. What if it was Indian sailors who first stepped onto American shores? Before we dive into this historical daydream, let's admit it. On paper, the odds look unlikely. In real history, Indian kingdoms were indeed brilliant seafarers, especially in the Indian Ocean, where their ships traded spices, cotton, gemstones, and ideas from East Africa to Southeast Asia. But long-distance oceanic voyages to unknown lands? Not part of the plan. Yet imagine an alternate timeline. A powerful South Indian dynasty, like the Vijayanagar Empire, decides to push westward, competing with Arab merchants for trade dominance. Better shipbuilding, driven by demand for more distant markets. And maybe, just maybe, a little curiosity and a healthy sprinkle of luck. History often changes because someone got lost, or was too stubborn to turn back. Let's say around the early 1400s, a group of daring Indian navigators set sail from the western coast, modern-day Kerala or Gujarat, aiming for a rumored rich land beyond Africa. Perhaps they meant to find new markets or new gold mines rumored in far-off tales. Instead of turning south, they followed the trade winds westward, past Africa, past all known maps, and after weeks of rough seas, stumble onto what we now call the Caribbean. They step onto golden sands, probably exhausted, seasick, but alive, carrying Indian textiles, spices, bronze statues, and a very different vision of the world. Forget armored conquistadors looking for El Dorado. Imagine peaceful traders in colorful cotton dhotis, offering pepper, cardamom, saffron, beads, and fine silk. Instead of swords and crossbows, they bring gifts and stories of Vishnu, Shiva, and Buddha. Instead of planting flags and claiming land, they build small trading enclaves near coastal villages, eager to barter for local goods. Cocoa beans, exotic feathers, rare woods, and maize. And unlike Europe's later discoveries, this first contact wouldn't be about conquest, but about commerce and culture. Imagine Native American chiefs staring at tiny bronze Ganesha idols, politely wondering why an elephant has 4 arms. Indian sailors trying maize porridge for the first time, and politely nodding while secretly missing rice and lentils. Both sides swapping words, food, dance moves, and possibly very different spiritual stories. A meeting not of empire and conquest, but of curiosity and trade. The Indian explorers didn't come for conquest. They came for trade. And the local civilizations? They'd seen traders before, just not ones wearing dhotis and offering black pepper like it was treasure. Instead of steel swords and cannons, Indians brought fine cotton cloth, light and perfect for the Caribbean climate, jewelry and beads, exotic spices that amaze local cooks, and a talent for building small coastal trading towns. They weren't here to build an empire. They wanted trading rights, new markets, and maybe the occasional temple to Ganesha or Vishnu overlooking the sea. Food fusion came next. Imagine New World maize cooked with Indian spices, or a dish of roasted cacao beans mixed with jaggery and cardamom. The first curry tacos, centuries ahead of their time. And local artisans, inspired by Indian patterns, start carving feathered totems mixed with lotus motifs. Small stone temples or wooden shrines might spring up in coastal enclaves. Not massive marble structures, but simple places where sailors prayed for safe voyages. Local people, curious, peek inside and see gods with elephant heads, blue skin, and multiple arms. Some laugh, some trade stories about their own spirits and ancestors. Syncretism, the blending of faiths, takes root naturally. News of the new land races back to India. Merchants dream of new products, exotic woods, colorful feathers, cocoa, vanilla. Indian kings and traders fund more voyages, not to conquer, but to secure better trade deals. And just maybe, get ahead of the Persian and Arab traders who dominate other routes. And coastal ports like Calicut, Surat, and Cochin become even richer, mixing Mexican maize and cacao into local cuisine and markets. Picture Columbus finally arriving in the Caribbean, only to discover an Indian trading post already there. Or Portuguese explorers sailing west, shocked to see ships flying Indian pennants anchored calmly in the bay. Europeans now face a well-established Indian trade network. Locals already trust the Indian traders, who don't demand tribute or land. Indian goods are cheaper and exotic, and the Indians don't show up with muskets. Suddenly, European conquest isn't so easy. Europeans still bring steel weapons, aggressive tactics, and missionary zeal. But instead of isolated tribes, they face local societies now linked into a new Indian trade network. Better goods and knowledge shared from across the ocean. Towns with mixed cultures, languages, and even some Indian settlers. Colonization would still be bloody, but much harder. And Europe might end up negotiating trade deals rather than easily planting flags. So, centuries roll on. The first Indian traders who stumbled into the Caribbean? Their small coastal posts become something bigger. Hubs of trade, language, and fusion. Let's see what really changes when you redraw history's map. Instead of the historical Atlantic Triangle of Europe, Africa, and the Americas built on slavery and conquest, we get something different. Indian ships ferrying spices, beads, and textiles from Asia to the Caribbean and Mesoamerica. American goods, maize, cacao, tobacco, vanilla, exotic woods, flowing back to Indian ports. Local American societies adapting Indian sailing knowledge and metalworking. Trade, rather than pure conquest, becomes the first big link between continents. Over centuries, small Indian trading settlements evolve into communities. Words from Tamil, Gujarati, or Sanskrit slip into local vocabularies. Some local elites send sons across the sea to study trade, astrology, or shipbuilding in Indian port cities. Temples dot the coastline, blending local deities with Shiva or Vishnu in unique ways. Imagine an Aztec-style stepped pyramid topped with a small shrine holding a bronze, Ganesha, or maize festivals mixing Indian dance and local ritual. Curry arrives in Mexico centuries early. Indian farmers introduce sugarcane and Asian rice strains to the Caribbean. American chili peppers and maize revolutionize Indian cooking even earlier. The combined cuisine spreads along Indian Ocean trade routes to Persia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. Europe doesn't stop wanting the riches of the East. But when they try to colonize the Caribbean or Mexico, they discover Indian traders already entrenched. Local societies wealthier and more globally connected. A real navy protecting these interests, built over generations. Instead of easy conquest, Europeans may have to trade, negotiate, or launch far costlier wars. Historically, Europe's conquest of the Americas created demand for enslaved labor, driving the Atlantic slave trade. In this alternate timeline, Indian traders prefer local labor systems and small farming villages. There's still exploitation, but less industrial-scale plantation slavery. Africa may avoid some of the worst demographic catastrophes of the slave trade. Imagine American herbal medicine studied in Indian Ayurvedic texts. Indian navigators sharing monsoon knowledge with Mesoamerican sailors. Shared mathematical ideas and calendar systems blending Vedic and Mayan astronomy. The American wheel, previously limited to toys and ritual, could get a boost from Indian engineering, changing transport and even agriculture. Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jain ideas spread quietly into the New World. Local American faiths influence Indian thinkers, adding new myths and symbols. Indian epics get retold with New World twists. Imagine a version of the Ramayana featuring jaguars, quetzals, and maize fields. A local Caribbean ruler writes letters to a Vijayanagara king, asking for astrologers to help predict hurricanes. Indian artisans carving stone statues of tropical birds they've never seen before. Markets in Gujarat selling tobacco centuries early, confusing historians forever. So far, we've talked about what Indian traders bring to the New World. But what about what they bring back? And how it changes India forever? In real history, the Vijayanagara Empire and others focused mostly on the subcontinent and the Indian Ocean. But now, news of a new land across the sea turns India outward, just as Europe later did. Coastal cities like Calicut, Cochin, and Surat become richer than ever. Rulers build stronger navies to protect overseas trade posts. Indian shipbuilding evolves, creating sturdier vessels for Atlantic crossings. India becomes an oceanic power, not just a continental one. Maize and sweet potatoes arrive centuries early, thriving in drier parts of India. Farmers in the Deccan Plateau plant maize instead of millet. Chilies from the New World spark the birth of fiery curries earlier than in real history. Cocoa makes its way into royal kitchens, blending with Indian spices into early versions of spiced chocolate drinks. Food history changes, and so does daily diet and farming. Imagine scholars at Indian temples and universities studying Mayan astronomy and calendars, American herbal medicine, new symbols and myths. Indian art adopts jaguars, tropical birds, and feather motifs. Storytellers weave tales of lands beyond the ocean, and epics gain new chapters set in faraway continents. Indians don't just dominate trade. They become fascinated by the New World. Paintings in Vijayanagara palaces depict exotic American landscapes. Poets write verses about heroic voyages across the endless ocean. Local fairs feature maize cakes, chocolate drinks, and feathered dances inspired by the Americas. India sees itself not just as an ancient civilization, but as a living, expanding part of a wider world. When Europeans finally round the Cape of Good Hope, they don't meet scattered ports, but powerful Indian navies and fortified trading towns. Instead of conquering easily, they must negotiate and pay taxes. Some European adventurers even hire on as mercenaries for Indian rulers. The Portuguese might still grab a few footholds, but the grand vision of European world domination becomes far less certain. India keeps its overseas connections for centuries. Indian-descended communities thrive in Caribbean ports and parts of Mesoamerica. Indian cuisine, language, and religion become part of American cultures. The word Indian in America doesn't refer to Native Americans by mistake. It is because real Indians were actually there. India's self-image changes too. Not just the land of ancient temples, but the land that discovered and traded with a whole new world. The story kids hear in school isn't Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but our ancestors crossed the Great Sea before anyone else. And modern Indian identity blends pride in ancient tradition with pride in global exploration. And yes, somewhere out there, a sleepy coastal town in Mexico holds an annual festival in honor of a bronze elephant god who legend says arrived by sea. And historians in this alternate universe argue endlessly on YouTube about who really discovered America first, the Indians or the other Indians? So here we are, standing on a sunlit dock in our alternate history. Indian ships unloading spices, beads, and bright fabrics. American traders bringing cacao, maize, and tropical feathers. A world knitted together by trade, curiosity, and storytelling, not just swords and flags. Of course, it didn't happen this way. Indian kingdoms stayed mostly within the Indian Ocean. The Americas remained unseen by them until Europeans arrived. But asking, what if, isn't about rewriting history out of boredom. It's about seeing the hidden possibilities, how chance, weather, ambition, or even a single stubborn captain can change everything. how different societies might meet, talk, argue, and share, not just fight. The idea that history could have been shaped by curiosity, trade, and mutual fascination, not just conquest, is strangely comforting. It reminds us that no civilization's fate is fixed, that even a single voyage can ripple through centuries, and that the story of who discovers who is really a story about who chooses to cross the sea and why. Somewhere in this alternate world, schoolchildren memorize dates of Indian discovery of America. European explorers grumble they got there too late. And an old stone temple in the Yucatan, with carvings of elephants and lotuses, makes archaeologists argue for centuries. Because history always keeps a sense of humor, even when we try to make it serious.